Hey, ladies, welcome to the Empowered and Unapologetic podcast. I'm your host, Veronica Cisneros. Today's guest is an integrative licensed psychologist and a neuroscientist. Let me do that again. Hey, ladies, welcome to the Empowered and Unapologetic podcast. I am your host, Veronica Cisneros. Today's guest is an integrative licensed psychologist and a neuroscientist who specializes in neurofeedback. She utilizes a non-medication approach to rewire the brain for optimizing all brain health conditions. Please help me by welcoming Dr. K. Hey.
Hi there. How are you, Veronica?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good.
So I am super excited to have you on the podcast, especially because, right now with medicine, especially with therapy being on the rise, a lot of my patients, the biggest fear is, do I need to go on medication? Like, do I need to go on medication, or does my child need to go on medication, and are they going to be a zombie? And so before we get into all of that, how did you get into this field? Like, what about this field inspired you to go ahead and be where you're at today, right? Where you're helping so many of your patients.
Yeah. So that's so fantastic that you asked that, because, at Healthy Within, and that's the name of my clinic, Healthy Within. And just for listeners, it's Dr. Divya Kakaiya. And, it's one of those names that's harder to pronounce. So I just wanted to be out there.
Yes.
And for me, what had occurred that was like super significant is that I have a son at the time that I have a postdoctoral degree. That's a Master of Science in Psychopharmacology. So when that degree, when I was getting my postdoctoral degree, around the same time as when my son was in 6th grade, and he was having a lot of processing issues. So he has inattentive ADHD. And I knew because of I'm such a seasoned psychologist who's been in practice for over 35 years, I knew that I did not want to put my child on medication because I was very familiar with all the side effects of the medications. And so I just happened to run into a colleague who was raving about neurofeedback. I took my son to her for a whole year. And then I ended up introducing a neurofeedback into my clinic. And then I think it's been about 13 years now. I completely rebranded what I was doing and just made my center a brain training and a brain health center. So that's what I do. And majority of the people who come to me come because they have had a lot of negative side effects with medications, or they're right from the get-go, they're realizing that, we've become a country that is so reliant on getting that quick fix and getting that pill. So neurofeedback, while it may take, a little bit longer for the brain to make the shift, the brain is this beautiful organ that if we give it the nudge, it's kind of like, I want your listeners to think about the brain neurofeedback as muscle exercise for the brain. You are exercising the brain to make your brain more healthy so the brain can serve the mind in a better way. So the brain is the organ, brain is the one that serves our mind. So when you it's sort of like if I do enough sit-ups, I'm going to make my abs stronger, right? So neurofeedback is exercise for the brain that makes the brain stronger so that it serves the mind better.
I love that. So with your son doing this work, what changes did you see in him?
So just homework used to take us 3.5 hours. I mean, I'm like, whoa, and he started processing. He started getting his homework done in the length of time it needed to be done. Was not medicated throughout entire high school. We never needed to put him on any meds, and his academic performance began to improve. But more than that, there's just like this processing piece that just began to improve. So he could read, he could, remain on task with the things he needed to do. The distractibility reduced. There was just a whole lot that occurred in the brain.
Yeah.
Coupled with the other factor is, even if here at my clinic, I'm treating somebody for ADHD. it isn't just the ADHD that improves, because remember, I'm working with the whole brain. So
Yeah.
if I'm making the brain get better, sleep improves, energy levels improve,
Yes.
focus improves, mood improves. So like I could have had that grumpy, cranky,
Yeah.
pre-puberty young dude on my
So
hand.
much fun.
Meanwhile,
So much fun. So much fun,
meanwhile, I
right?
ended up having this like very pleasing young man, and we have like the best. He's 25 now. We have the best
Oh,
relationship because of just, you know, where things went to with his brain. So I just, and of course, you know, as a mom, you know, as a parent, we have to put in that extra work to connect with
yes.
children too. Yeah.
So I love that we're talking about this, because early on, my daughter, she's 20 now. She struggled in school, same thing. And I remember thinking, you know, gosh, she's so lazy. Like, just get it done. Like, why are you avoiding? Obviously, I was not a therapist back then. I had no clue. I had no clue. And I remember being so frustrated. In addition to that, my husband, Willie, was deployed. He was in Afghanistan. So I didn't realize
Yeah.
that my frustrations with her kept me from seeing what was actually going on. You know, I was so frustrated. I was so overwhelmed. I was sleep deprived. I was going through my master's. I was in grad school. So there was, right? So there was so many things going on. And it wasn't until she was in high school that one of the teachers had mentioned, hey, you know what? I think we might want to test her for ADHD. And so we ended up testing her for ADHD, and she did have traits. We ended up having, obviously, the results from the child psychologist or the school psychologist, but then a very, very good friend of mine, I had her go over the results as well. Just because I didn't trust the school, if I'm just being 1,000% honest.
Right. Because
I
they
didn't
do
trust the school.
no, the schools don't
Exactly.
do a thorough job. They just want to
No,
do.
exactly.
Absolutely. I know.
And so I had my one of my colleagues who's a child psychologist, I had her go ahead and review the results, and she had mentioned, you know, well, Aaliyah does show some symptoms, you know, some traits of ADHD. And so it's like, okay, well, what do I do? And you know, she ended up being fine. And I say this in quotes, being fine. Was she really fine? Probably not, you know, but for me, it was like, okay, I don't have to medicate her, even though I know what I know as a therapist, never really did any research on neurofeedback or even know about it. This is why, you know, this is why I was so excited to interview you as well, because it, you know, just like you, it's something near and dear to my heart. Well, Aaliyah now is in college and she's doing great, right? And how many times do you hear, you know, especially as a professional, for girls, they're doing great. They're not
acting out.
yes, they're not acting out. And I want to make sure I hit on this. They're not acting out. They're not failing. So she doesn't need any help. She doesn't need any help, right? That's how true is that? It's not.
She struggles.
Bingo.
Yeah.
So now my daughter is 20. She's in her junior year of college. And so let's say for somebody like me, again, even though I'm a therapist, you know, I as well fear medication. You know, my daughter was, I'm not sure who she was talking to, but they had said, hey, you know what, maybe you should be tested again as an adult. And my daughter's just like, her biggest fear is, I don't want to be on medication. And obviously that's one of mine as well. And so what would you say, because young women, young girls, they're the ones who often get like completely overlooked, right? Because they're not failing, they're not showing behaviors, right? And so let's say for somebody like me, what would be the steps you would recommend for somebody like me, or even our listeners? Because I know a lot of my clients struggle with this as well. So it's going to be like twofold. What would you say are the steps necessary for us parents to take to go ahead and really help our child that, again, is either struggling with ADHD or traits of ADHD?
So here's the point I always make.
Yes.
Which is, if you go to a physician and there are some issues going on with your liver, they're going to do blood work. They're going to do a scan of the liver. They will do an MRI of the liver. They are going to really explore what's going on with that organ before they come up with any sort of a strategy as to what we're going to do there, right? there is blood work that can be done on a person, child, adult, that shows us what their genetic code is that has what we call them SNPs, that has the fragility for particular conditions. There's that same blood test also shows which medication should not be prescribed for this person. Okay, there's two big tests. There's one called Genomind and there's one called GeneSight. Do you know that majority of psychiatrists will never do that blood test before they start? You write a prescription for this, that doesn't work. Write a prescription for this, that doesn't work. So they don't do the blood work. Okay, so blood work can be done. Scanning of the brain can be done. And the scanning of the brain is called a QEEG, or brain mapping. Now, brain mapping is something I do here in my clinic because I want to know exactly which frequencies in the brain are awry, what's not working right, and what region of the brain is that not working right in. Then comes treatment at that point. Okay, so the treatment at that point then would be brain training, because I know from my brain scan, sort of like a person who's developed cancer, they're going to look at, say, if it's breast cancer, whether it's estrogen positive or estrogen negative. In the same way, my brain mapping shows us exactly what regions of the brain I should be focused on and how to begin the training with that brain. So there is science. Neurofeedback has been around for over 32 years. There is science. There are lots of research studies. American Academy of Pediatrics has established neurofeedback as a level 1 treatment of choice for ADHD. Do you think my pediatricians know that?
No, not at all.
No, they do
not at all.
And they never bring up neurofeedback as an option to putting the kid on Ritalin or putting them on Adderall or something like that. Okay.
Yeah, I love this.
Keep in mind that neurofeedback not only just treats ADHD, so we're focused on that. I treat depression very successfully. Anxiety is one of my easier conditions to treat, believe it or not.
Wow.
Okay. I treat epilepsy. I treat migraines. I treat people with concussions. I treat people that are on the spectrum, because everything that occurs that's behaviorally oriented all sits in the brain. Why would you not go to strengthening that core organ of ours first before you start popping all kinds of medications into it?
And that's one thing that that frustrates me the most, is because just like you were saying, you were mentioning a pediatrician wouldn't know to go ahead and recommend neurofeedback, right? Just like a therapist wouldn't know to recommend neurofeedback unless
or brain mapping.
Exactly. Unless we network, unless we're like stepping out to, and which is exactly what I'm doing, right? And we're stepping outside of our realm and finding out what other options are there for our clients, so they're not stuck, in this habitual pattern of, medication and side effects, right? This is again why, I had met one of your colleagues, and I was so excited. He was telling me all about you. I can't think of his name right now, but he was telling me all about you. I was like,
Christopher.
Yes, Christopher. And I was just I was like, oh my gosh, I have to meet her. I have to have her on the podcast, because this information has to be out. Right now, as you're saying all of these things, it's like, oh, okay, ladies, there's going to be a part 2, because I'm definitely going to have my daughter, join your program, Dr. Kakaiya, and do the process, because I know she needs it. So what would you say is the biggest benefits a patient gets from this neurofeedback when they're struggling with ADHD?
Okay, so with ADHD, processing speed increases, memory improves, focus improves, hyperactivity reduces, sleep gets better, because, with people with inattentive ADD, they get this burst of energy at 8 o'clock at night. And so, there's all of this productivity that happens in the late hours of the night. Now, we know, particularly for developing minds and developing brains, that sleep that we get between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. is one of the most critical aspects of sleep. So neurofeedback, whether you're using it for ADHD, you're using it for depression, you're using it for anxiety, I might be using it for Parkinson's, because I'm treating people with Parkinson's with neurofeedback. Okay. what happens is the number one thing that happens is the quality of the sleep improves. The minute the quality of our sleep improves, because sleep is very regenerative, right?
1000%.
Sleep is cleansing. When we sleep, there is a process that occurs in the sleep that it's called the lymphatic system. You know how we have the lymphatic system that cleans out the toxins from the body. There's a system called glymphatic, GLYM, glymphatic system. During sleep, particularly when we're dreaming, the neurons shrink, the cerebrospinal fluid flows through the brain and removes the toxins from the brain and eliminates them. So sleep sweeps out toxins from our brain. Most people with any kind of brain issues, so I'm talking about any brain issues, you're talking about ADHD, we could have anxiety, we could have migraines, we could have seizures, any brain issue that's going on, sleep becomes an essential piece. We also know the connection between lack of sleep and Alzheimer's. So if anybody who comes to me earlier for insomnia, like say in their 50s or whatever, that's such a good thing that they're doing, because we know that when our sleep cycles, our circadian rhythm and our sleep cycle is regulated, then your brain is regulated, then your mind is regulated, then your life is regulated. So what neurofeedback does is it brings regulation to the brain, makes the brain more regulated.
Yeah, I love it.
Right? Yeah.
One thing I'm also hearing is, you know, like I'm thinking about my daughter right now, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, you know, because I know Aaliyah gets frustrated that there are times where people are talking to her and she's just like, she's just in space.
She's faded out. She's faded out.
She's totally faded out. And it's,
Yeah.
and people bring that to her attention and she's like, Mom, I don't know, you know, I'm here, but
Right.
my little, I call her my lizard.
Yeah, those are, well, and those are my patients I have so much success with.
Yeah.
And I tell you, the reason why I love the field I'm in now, I was in a different field for 25 years, but the field I love right now is because literally every single day, Veronica, every single day, I see amazing growth and change in my patients. And it's time limited. Remember, it's not like, oh, you have to be in neurofeedback forever and ever and ever. Because once I set the brain on the right path, the brain is very neuroplastic. The brain wants to be well. So what I'm doing as a practitioner, I'm coming in and I'm saying to the brain, you're very capable of doing this. Come on, let's do this. I'm nudging the brain. I'm making the brain work hard because my patients are tired when they leave the
Yes.
And I put snacks out in my waiting room just because you get so hungry since the brain uses so much metabolic energy and they're doing so much work. So the brain becomes healthier, because a lot of times people will ask the question, does neurofeedback last? Do we have to keep coming back for it? And when I'm working with a teen particularly, or a young adult, those are such pivotal times for us because between age 12 and age 22 is when the brain is laying all the neural pathways for its healthy functioning as an adult. So what we want to do with our kiddos as much as possible is, if you see any brain challenges, I call it brain challenges rather than mental health challenges.
Absolutely.
Any brain challenges, get that care, because you're giving such a huge gift to how that person is going to be in their adult years. I tell you, taking my son for that 1 year, I did not mind at all. I paid every dime I needed to pay. Was like the best thing I ever did. I call him my patient number one. I'm like, you're my patient number one. Even in the book I write my story about him, because I knew I used to help out in his classroom. I used to volunteer in the classroom, and I could tell, because the entire class settles down, right? Everybody's starting, the teacher's given instructions, the class settles down. He's starting to do his work. He's thinking about doing his work, and then he looks around the room, and then he takes his pencil and he walks all the way across the room to sharpen his pencil and distracts everybody along the way. I think that's my young man. I mean, even in high school, the teachers would say, hey, if Kush is on track, the whole class is on track.
Exactly.
If Kush is not on track, he can derail the entire class. So that's sort of like, part of it is his personality, but the part of it is that distractible brain. But now, like, he's working and he's so successful in his job, and I see him and he like power for hours, and I'm like, honey, don't you get tired with how much you do? And he's like, no, mom, this is something I enjoy and I
I
stay
love it.
in it. And he crosses all his T's and dots all his I's, because part of what used to happen is he would start a project and not complete it, which is what happens with a lot of kids with ADHD. So procrastination reduces, completion of tasks, all the things that us mothers go bananas over.
Yes, yes. I'm telling you, listen, I did not know. I had obviously you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
And I had no clue, what I was up against. And it wasn't until I started, in grad school where, I mean, even then it still didn't make sense. It wasn't until I was literally, if I'm being 1,000% honest, it wasn't until I was literally sitting across from a patient where I realized, oh, my little one was struggling with all of this. And, oh, I behaved maybe the same way your mom did, and it's like, and we don't know what we don't know. And this is why we're listening to this podcast. And this is why we're going to make an appointment with Dr. Kakaiya and get this done. So if you can, give me what to expect. So Aaliyah's coming to you. We already established that. We're going to go ahead and have Aaliyah come to you. So what should we expect when we do sign up for this? Is it a program? Is it, are these sessions, like what can we expect?
So the initial thing I do, and I have a special offer happening. Typically a brain mapping is around anywhere between $800 to $1,200.
Mm-hmm.
I charge $800, but currently I have a special I'm running where it's for $199, right?
Okay.
So real hot special. Then I sit down with the patient that a second time after I get the results back from the brain mapping. I also do a very comprehensive evaluation, which I spend about an hour and a half doing that. So I want to understand everything else that's going on, if there's any past traumas, different things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then at that point, I map out how many sessions. I'm able to tell by that time how many approximate sessions we're going to need. And then I know clinically what I'm going to do. And then I get started with that. And I offer like packages and things like that. So people can just reach out to me and I'll be happy to do that. But I think also, with your listeners being all over the country, hopefully, research in your area, neurofeedback providers in my town, and then look at their backgrounds and make sure that it's not just somebody who's just kind of set up shop.
No.
That they have the right qualifications, they have the right degrees, they're doing all of that stuff, meticulously, and what their years of experience are, and what your conversation with them is like when you make that initial contact. Because to me, that's very important. Anybody who's coming with a brain that's struggling, we as receivers of that care should feel respected.
Absolutely.
Listened to, we should feel attended to, and we should feel like, because when people come to me, they're trusting their brain to.
Yeah.
Imagine
this
that.
Is big. This is
it's
big.
Really big. So I'm going to treat it with that level of respect and dignity and kindness and compassion. That's just who we are and how we do things here.
Yes. And that's one thing that Christopher had mentioned about you. And you could tell, like, even just talking to you right now, the biggest thing when you're looking, I'm going to piggyback on what you just stated. The biggest thing when you're looking for providers, whether it be a pediatrician, psychiatrist, therapist, psychologist, feedback provider, you have to make sure that, yes, okay, they might specialize in it, right? And you want to make sure that they have the appropriate, credentials, because right now I hate to say it, but that there is, where people, set up shop and it's like, here you go. So you do have to do your due diligence and, make sure you are going with somebody that's reputable. And I will not record with anybody that is not reputable. Yeah. Obviously, Dr. Kakaiya is a very, very well-known physician, and I have a high level of respect for her. So with this, we're ready to set up appointment. How do we find you?
So I have a website, healthywithin.com. I have an Instagram, Healthy Within Neurofeedback. I have Facebook. I am on LinkedIn. I mean, if you just put my name in, Divya Kakaiya, A ton, shit tons.
A ton. And we will have all of it. We will have all of this in our show notes.
Yes.
We will have her website link. We will have all of her social media link in our website notes. The other thing that I definitely wanted to make sure I mentioned is you do also have a webinar. So we'll go ahead and add that to our show notes.
Yes.
That way you guys have this information. Listen, being in this field, even as a therapist, I hear you, moms. You're struggling. Your children are struggling, and the majority of my audience, they're high achieving moms. And high achieving moms, we're busy. We are busy. We're badasses. We're running corporations. We're running the kids. We're running the husband. We're doing it all, right? And at the same time, I want to go ahead and empathize with the fact that we do lose our shit sometimes. And it's not meant to be that way. I had admitted that I did this with my daughter. I didn't know. I didn't know. And it wasn't literally until I had a patient right across from me where I was like, oh, wait a minute. I've been guilty of that.
Yeah.
And so, right. And so I want to say that thank you so much, Dr. Kakaiya, for coming on here and just providing us with this information. And I am definitely, ladies, I am definitely going to do a part 2. Here's why. I am going to be signing up Aaliyah and probably myself. We'll go ahead and get to that later, but I will be definitely signing up Aaliyah, and Aaliyah doesn't know this, but she's totally game. I want to make sure.
And she'll adore us here.
And she'll adore us.
Adore
right?
us
She's
here.
like, Mom, what did you
sign
sign me
She's
up
going to
for?
feel so good.
That's the thing. That's what I want, right?
Right. And the thing that happens, the reason why also neurofeedback is so effective is because kids who have not liked psychotherapy, they come in here. They love coming for neurofeedback because while they're receiving the training on their brain, they're actually watching a movie. The screen becomes super small.
Yeah.
You have to make the screen big. There's a teddy bear on their lap that buzzes. So you got the visual stimulation, the tactile, and the auditory stimulation. That's how I'm changing the brain. I'm not putting any electrical pulses into the brain. So it's non-invasive. So I don't want moms to worry about the fact that, is she putting anything into the brain, because it is non-invasive.
Yes.
And it's very powerful. My kids, children, teens, adults, nobody complains about coming in for neurofeedback. They want to be here because they feel better.
Yeah.
And there's hope. And there's hope. We want to give everybody hope.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we will be doing a part 2. I will be interviewing Dr. Kakaiya again and sharing with you guys Aaliyah's journey and what the experience is like as a parent, and provide you guys with more information. Dr. Kakaiya, I don't want to take too much of your time. Thank you so much for coming on, and I'm excited to do a part 2 with you.
Thank you. Thank you. This was an honor. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And good luck with everything. All right. You take care. Bye-bye.